I am pumped to finally have you on the I Am More Than podcast. I've been fangirling from afar on TikTok, like millions of other people. So to have you in the flesh is awesome. So welcome to the show.
Thank you. I'm so excited to be here. And I have a special guest. I have Winston is here. He's not leaving my side. So you have both of us today.
I love that. I love that. Special guest. So for all of you who are watching on YouTube, you can be blessed by his presence.
You're welcome.
Welcome in advance. So I feel like when I first stumbled upon you on TikTok, I was instantly captivated by the fact that like you show so much personality through a screen and was like, she just seems badass. Like I want to be friends with her essentially. And then when we actually started talking, I couldn't get over how kind you are and just how down to earth and like just how human you are, which I don't think you see a lot of when you're in the industry, especially when I learned you've been in the industry for a very long time. So I'm curious what makes you you. I'm curious to hear about your journey. So I think let's start from the beginning of you kind of being thrown into the industry or how you chose to get into it and kind of how that all started for you.
Yeah, well, thank you. That's those are very kind words. I have a very interesting, I guess, story of how I ended up here. I grew up in Massachusetts, just north of Boston. And I was a regular kid. I was a gymnast. I went to school. I had normal kid hobbies. And becoming an actor is something I just accidentally fell into. There was a competition back in 2003, 2004. It was called Are You All That? The Search for the Funniest Kid in America. And it was hosted by Nickelodeon. And they were searching for the funniest kid in America. And the winner would become a cast member on All That. So I just blindly auditioned. I wasn't a child actor. A lot of the kids who did audition were child actors. I was just, and I think that kind of is what helped me, is that there was no pressure. I wasn't trying to prove anything or book a job. I was just being my normal goofy self. And I'm an only child. I was always the performer of the family and I loved making people laugh. So that's what I did. I just submitted a tape of me doing that. And long story short, I won. And I picked up and I moved to Los Angeles. And
wow.
Yeah, I think I was very lucky. I had two parents that kept me very grounded and followed my every move. And it was always about having fun. Because I wasn't a child actor, because this wasn't something that I knew that I wanted to do yet, I was just having fun. And I think when you're able to remove the pressure of like, I need to book this job or this is a really big opportunity for me, you can really just live in the moment. And that's what I did. I was just a kid having fun. I worked with some great other child actors and it was just like this giant playground for us to make people laugh. And when my career started getting a bit more serious at the time and there were talks of, do you want to stay out here? Do you want to continue to do this? My parents always just said to me, like, are you still having fun? There came to a point where it wasn't that I wasn't having fun anymore. I wanted to be a normal kid. I wanted to go to high school football games and be a gymnast and go to class. So when the show wrapped after 10 seasons, I remember telling my parents, like, I just want to go home. I just want to be normal. I want to be a kid. I want to see my friends. And I think that is what has helped me now as somebody that's transitioned back into acting, is that I had a 15-year break of being a quote unquote normal kid. Went to high school, went to college, did internships, worked service jobs, just like lived a completely normal life. And coming back out here and pursuing acting again, I just had a very different perspective. I'd been on both sides. I understood how much hard work it took to be there for everyone. And that's kind of how I started back into acting. And I think that's what has given me maybe that sense of reality that a lot of people who stay in the industry forever don't necessarily have, to no fault of their own. But I think being able to take a break and be in the real world has definitely helped me. And then as far as falling into TikTok, that was, I mean, COVID made all of us do things that we wouldn't normally do. And Hollywood was the first industry to close and the last to open. And everybody obviously was struggling for an array of reasons. But for me as a creative, I just felt I just didn't feel like I had much direction or purpose, because so much of my purpose comes from entertainment. And TikTok was still that, like, as a millennial, it was that, you can't, we're too old to be on there. And for a while I would just kind of bash it because I knew I couldn't be there. So I just bullied the platform from afar. And then one day I was like, what else am I doing? I have nothing going on. Let's just do it. And I just started making funny lip sync videos, and I started to love making them more than anything. It helped me with memorization. And then it just kind of, people started to love it, and it kind of grew an audience. And same thing with how I ended up in Hollywood. It worked because there was no pressure on it. It wasn't like, I want content creation to be my job, I want to be a TikToker. It was just like, I'm just going to do this and have fun. And I think people read that. People know when people are authentic and when they're genuinely having a good time. And that's all I wanted it to be, was just a place where I could entertain and have fun. And yeah, I guess that's kind of where I'm at right now.
And you're doing a good job at it. And I feel like that translates. You can totally tell that you're just having a good time.
Yeah.
And I think it also made sense then when I found out that you are in the acting industry. I'm like, this girl can memorize things that, like, is mind blowing to me. It's so cool to watch. But I think it's interesting how you said that when you did come out that your parents were on the same page of, like, just have fun.
Yeah.
Because I think TV back then, especially when we were growing up, I'm a 90s baby, I'm assuming you are as well, that, like, Nickelodeon and Disney was it. Like, it was different than it is now because we didn't have all social media. And I think being in that world and also knowing when you wanted to remove yourself at such a young age is really rare, because we see now all of these child actors coming out that weren't treated properly in the industry.
Yeah.
And I think the industry is tough anyways for an adult. I'm sure navigating as a child, if you didn't have parents that were defending you, would be tough.
Yeah. I mean, I saw it happen. I saw you have to have complete parental control as a child. It is an adult industry. Even if there's kids in it, it is still an adult industry. And you need to have people around you that you trust, that have your best interests in mind, that are looking out for you, because we've seen it. It will do, an immense amount of damage to you long term if you don't have that. And I was really grateful to have that. And I think having that also made me realize, like, I'm good for now. I did it, and I feel good. And also, like you were saying, I mean, at that time, being on television, you were a celebrity, right? Now it's like everything is so saturated. Everybody has a social media following or something that makes them notable or recognizable. Especially, I live in Los Angeles. Everybody is famous. But at the time, it was like, you're on television, you are famous. And I had a really hard time dealing with that at the time, because all that was the show for our generation. And I remember coming back to Massachusetts, especially in the small town that I was from, nobody was acting or on television. And it was swarms of children everywhere I would go. And I remember as a kid being like, if that's the cost, this isn't fun. It was fun when in Los Angeles, it was different because you would still get recognized and people would come up to you. But in Los Angeles, it's very different than a small suburb outside of Boston. Yeah. And I remember coming home and being like, if this is what the cost is, I don't want to do it. This isn't what I want to do. And I can't imagine. I see kids now that are so successful in the industry, and I can't imagine how difficult that must be, going out and not being able to just, like, go to the mall with your friends and, go to the movie theater, all the things that, like, kids should be able to do. So I'm so happy that I had that experience and loved it enough that I was able to pursue it again as an adult, but that I took enough time off that I was able to have a normal childhood and do all the things that I wanted to do. So
Was the transition once you got back home and back into school, and obviously everybody that you're around has been watching you on TV, was that a weird experience for you as a kid?
Yeah.
Or did you feel like you transitioned easily just back into like normal life?
No, it was not great. I was 10. I was very naive to how these things would play out. And I
As
remember,
you should be.
yeah, exactly. I remember coming back to Boston kind of just like, okay, I'm done. Let's just pick up where I left off. And I had friends, best friends that acted like they didn't know who I was when I came back. I had people that were bullies to me before I left that all of a sudden wanted to carpool with me to school, and just things that I didn't really understand as a kid. And my parents had to navigate how to go about explaining that to me as well. I was a gymnast at the time. Gymnastics was my life. I remember going to gymnastics competitions and just having swarms of girls kind of like congregating and whispering, right? Because they didn't understand. It was like, you have this girl that's on all that's at our like Rhode Island gymnastics competition. It was new for everybody.
Yeah.
And it was really hard for me. I think I was also an only child. It got to a point where it was so bad that I remembered saying I never wanted to do it again. And I didn't want anything to do with entertainment. And with that also came me completely shutting down as a goofy, entertaining kid. I kind of became a little bit of a shell for a while. I didn't want to talk about it. I hated when people would bring it up. I mean, all the way even into college, like my early freshman year of college, I remember I went to Emerson, which was a liberal arts college. Everybody knew it was theater and acting. And when there was news that I was going to Emerson, I remember that first semester just having so many people come up to me. And I was like, oh my God, I cannot escape this. Like, I just don't want to keep being the kid that was on all that. I just let me be me.
Yeah.
And then eventually, going to Emerson was the best place for someone like me to go because, everybody was very similar in that sense that they loved entertainment or the arts or something that I felt very at home. And I was able to finally be proud of my time on the show. But for so long, I resented it and wanted nothing to do with it. And then my senior year, first semester of college, I interned at Comedy Central in Los Angeles. We had like a study abroad program, quote unquote, in Los Angeles. And I remember being at Comedy Central and I was doing press releases and I was on the opposite side of where I had once been. And I remember being like, what am I doing? Like, this is where I need to be. I need to do this. I'm going to go back. I'm going to graduate and I'm going to come back out here the second I can come back out here. And that's what I did. But it took me a very long time 15 years to get to that point of being proud of what I did and being able to start it again.
Yeah. And it sounds like you were so defined by 2 years of your life.
Yeah.
And too crucial as you're growing up.
Totally.
And I think that it's weird how people that are not at all in the industry perceive the industry. Almost that like if you are a public figure of any type, and I think it's especially prevalent now, that if you put yourself out there and you are a public figure, then you're almost like asking to be defined by that.
Totally.
And I think when you're in Los Angeles or even New York or around people that are kind of used to it, you almost just like get numb. But for a child, like that's no way to be able to navigate that. So it's interesting that you did almost like a full circle, like ran from it and then realized it's part of who you are. Mm-hmm. So you pack up your bags, you move out to LA. And was it like, this is where I'm going to be and I'm just going to like start going to auditions? Did you get signed by an agency? Like, what was that transition like for you?
Well, then that was a whole other journey. I think I was very much humbled coming back to Los Angeles. I'm not going to lie. I thought I'm going to go back to I was already a series regular. I knew so many people in the industry. I'm just going to go back to Los Angeles and do it again. And the industry had changed so much, and I had changed so much. And I was in no position to be booking anything. I hadn't acted in 15 years. And I came back out, and I was able to get into doors because of what I had done as a kid. But people didn't know what to do with me because, okay, you were a child actor. You haven't been acting in 15 years. We know you know how to be on set, but you're a completely different person. And for a while, people wanted to keep pigeonholing me into kids comedy. And I was like, I don't want to do that. I'm like, but also when you first move to Los Angeles, especially as an actor, you're very doe-eyed and you have to take any opportunity you get. And you're like, oh, I don't want to turn down any opportunity. What if that's the opportunity that leads to something else? So and also like my parents did everything for me as a kid. So this was my first time learning the industry, and I just failed for years. I didn't know what to do. I couldn't trust anybody. I thought I had people that I thought I could trust that wouldn't answer my calls. I just had to completely scratch everything that I had to stop leaning on the fact that I was an actor and just completely start all over again. And I was working service jobs. I was working at the front desk at Equinox. I was working as a hostess. I was barely making rent. I was going through different friend groups. I was trying to do the LA thing. Social media started becoming really big. And I was like, oh, how do I navigate that? And then it was like, this is at the time where influencers were so big, and like influencers were getting jobs in entertainment. And I was like, great, do I have to like now have social media? Like there was just so many moving parts, and I had no idea where to go. And I did everything. I mean, I did acting classes, I did workshops. I used like the last $200 in my bank to book a workshop to like maybe meet a casting director. I met with agents. I had agents. I dropped agents. I just kept trying to find my people.
Yeah.
And that process took a really long time, and people don't talk about how long that takes. I mean, even now I hear people, more so non-actor friends, that'll see somebody on television that kind of just in their eyes is all of a sudden famous. And they're like, oh my God, this person just came out of nowhere. And I'm always like, go look at their IMDb. They've been working for 30 years. They just haven't become recognizable until this project that they've done. So like, it's such a long game. And I remember getting to a point where I was like, I mean, I was missing funerals, weddings, birthdays, everything. I couldn't afford my plane tickets to go back home. I was so afraid to leave Los Angeles because I didn't want to miss an audition or a casting or anything. It was just like my life was dedicated to a job that I didn't even have. And I remember I had one really bad meltdown. I had a family member pass, and then I got another family member had gotten sick. And I went to get my car fixed. I went to an auto body. I went to get my car fixed. And this guy who does not know me, I had been crying, and I pulled it together and I dropped my car off, and he's like, how you doing? And I'm like, oh, I'm doing all right. He's like, I don't know what it is. I just feel like I need to tell you, you are really talented. And whatever it is that you're struggling with, you got to keep going. He said, I can just feel your energy, and you're so lively, and you got to keep going. And I was like, it was just weird. And I remember calling my parents, and my parents had taken their card to him before. And I called my parents. I'm like, you're not going to believe this interaction. And they were like, Christina, that man doesn't speak. Like, we've gone in to see him like 5 times. He maybe says 2 words. And a week later, I got a call that I booked Ambitions, which is the last show I worked on, which was shooting in Atlanta. It was, hey, you booked it. You're leaving on Wednesday to go to Atlanta. And I
full body chills.
it was very much one of those like, wow, this happens. And that show gave me my confidence back. And looking back, I understood why I didn't book anything before. I understood why opportunities didn't happen, because I wasn't ready. Like I didn't have the tools yet, and I needed to trust. I wish I trusted that more. All those years of struggling, of I know people say, regardless of what you believe, when something is meant to be yours, I truly believe it'll be yours when the time is right. And then I worked in Atlanta, and then COVID happened. And then everything changed again. But that's kind of the whole story of how I got back into it, and the struggle. And I remember having the moment before I booked Ambitions of, this isn't going to come easy. This is not going to be something where you're making money tomorrow. You need to make you have to love this more than anything in the world to continue to pursue this, because this industry is insane. There's no, we're taught, work hard and you'll do well in life. And entertainment or being a entrepreneur, that throws everything out the window. You can be the talented, smartest, whatever person, and you still don't work. So you have to make sure that you love it more than anything in the world. And there's nothing that you want to do other than that. And I got to a point where I was like, I have so many interests, and yet there's nothing else I would rather be doing than this. And I'm going to do this, and I'm going to commit to it. And I know financially I'm going to struggle. I know I'm going to lose time with my family and my friends. But I do know that when I am doing this, it is the happiest I am, entertaining people, whether I'm bringing them to tears or bringing them joy. That is what I truly feel my purpose is. Whatever that looks like, I don't know, but I'm going to do everything to keep fighting for it.
I still have chills, literal full body chills, especially because I've seen bits and pieces. I haven't been in the acting industry, but even from the modeling industry side, the day-to-day grind is stuff that 99% of people don't talk about, because I think if they were to talk about it, they would break. Just like that guy that could clearly see that you were on the verge of tears, that I think so many people function like that because it's such a struggle. And then when you do get a big break, it makes it all feel worth it. So now that you've had that bigger break, when there are lulls in the career, when there's gaps and you haven't booked something yet, what tools did you develop during that time that you remind yourself to stay in the grind and remember how much you love it, even when days suck and when you're not working?
To be fully transparent, I have breakdowns almost every other day. And as does, you speak with most actors that people are they're going through the same thing. I think what I've realized more recently, I tend to isolate. It's just something I'm learning to be better at. When I'm going through stuff, I fully isolate for many reasons. And you cannot do this alone. I hate asking for help. Even the idea of asking for help, it makes my whole body itch. But you have to. You have to have people, whether you're in modeling, whether you're an actor or a singer, you have to have a community of people. It doesn't have to be a lot of people. It just has to be people in your life that you trust, that you can lean on. Because when you have a group of creatives, there's always somebody that's more up and somebody that's more down. And if you can do check-ins and do whatever you can to lift the other person up, that's the only way you're going to get through this. I just went through something in my career that was unexpected, that hurt like hell, that it was actually the first time in maybe the last 7 years that I looked to my boyfriend and I said, I don't think this is for me. I don't think I can do this anymore. And I hadn't done that. Mm-hmm. And I just happened to sign up for acting class. I did a couple of Zoom classes during COVID, but I haven't done an in-person acting class since pre-COVID. And acting class is a lot. It's it's a big time commitment. You're using a lot of material. It's a lot. Especially if you go to a good class, it's a lot. And I got a text about this acting class, and I remember being like, I just don't have the mental capacity to do this right now. And I was like, I'm going to sit on it. And 2 hours later, I signed up for the class. And 3 days later, I go through this part in my career where I'm like, I cannot believe 7-8 years in, I have to freaking deal with this right now. And if I hadn't have been in that acting class, I probably would have been like, I'm good for now. I'm going to stop. But because I had this horrible day and this horrible period, and I was able to go to class and create and be amongst other people that are doing what I'm doing. I was like, oh my, like I remember getting out of my first class back and just being like, that's all I needed. That was just like the little bit that I needed to keep me going, because I just had so much fun doing this in front of people that are doing what I'm doing. So I think community, finding a way to do what you love. When you're an actor or a musician or whatever it is, you're not always doing the things that set your soul on fire, right? Like you might book a job where you don't love the script, or you might have to do a gig where you don't love the role, or whatever it is. That's just part of the industry. And you have to make sure that you're always doing something for yourself to remind you of why you love it, because you can burn out very easily, whether that's writing, whether that's shooting scenes with your friends, whether that's doing a class, whether that's whatever that looks like. But just bits and pieces to remind you of why you love this and why you're doing this, because you can burn out so easily doing what we do, reading other people's work. And yeah, so I think obviously my dog agrees.
He's upset about it too.
He is. Yeah, community. I would say community, and remember that there really is no consistency in this industry. Even the people that you think are consistent, they're not. And you have to have other things that you love that you do. You have to have other passions and hobbies, and because when you put your energy into those things, that's when you work. It's kind of a you know, a known thing in the industry that if you want to book a job, you book a trip. If you book a trip, then that's when you get the call that you booked the job. So just making sure that you always have other things going on in your life that make you happy, and hobbies that you pursue.
Do you think that's almost what TikTok has been for you during this time too?
Totally.
It's such a positive outlet because you're in full control of what you're putting out.
It's when I had first moved back to Los Angeles, somebody who I'm still very close with, he was the booking agent on all that back in the day. At the time when I had come back out to Los Angeles, he was head of influencer marketing, I think, at Instagram. And he had worked with all of the really big OG comedic influencers. And I had a meeting with him, and he was the one that was like, you got to get on social media. And I was like, I hate social media. I don't want to do it. I don't get it. I didn't get it. Like, it wasn't really big where I was from. And he said, listen, you are not going to have any control of anything you do in this industry. That is the one thing you have control of. You can control how you market yourself, the kind of content that you put out, how you want people to see you, perceive you. That's the one thing you have control of. Why not do that? And I was like, wow, I had never thought of it like that. And yeah, that's totally what TikTok has become for me. Is like, I have total control of what I do and what people see. And that's so freeing. And that is another reminder of like why I love to do this, because I love to entertain. And this gives me a platform to entertain on my terms and in the way that I want to do it. So absolutely. And it's taken the pressure off of acting, because I feel like I've built this community. I mean, I sometimes I go through and read some of the comments, and like, I mean, they're so sweet. It's just people like, hey, whatever you do, I'm going to watch it, just because people become invested in people and brands on social media, and they want to see those people and brands flourish, and they want to watch them. So that's been very inspiring and motivating for me. So yeah, totally.
Yeah. How are you taking care of your mental health as a component? Because I know you're a huge advocate for mental health too. And I think it's something that is becoming more talked about, but it's still like, I feel like when you do hear about it, it's like, well, on the days that like I really struggle, I'll like journal and then I'm fine. Where it's like the day to day when it gets really tough, when you're the one that has to like hold yourself accountable. What are you doing to pick yourself up? I know, challenging question.
It's just there's so much here for me, because I have dealt with anxiety my entire life, ever since I was a kid. I didn't understand that it was anxiety at the time. But I mean, as early as 5 years old, my mom would tell me that I never let anybody see me cry. I would have a bad day at school, I would hold it together in front of even in front of my parents, I was like prideful. And then I would go in my room, shut the door, and cry. And I carried all of that into being an adult.
Yeah.
And that is my biggest struggle, is isolating and completely shutting down. And anxiety, depression, it all runs in my family. All things I've dealt with, never really had the proper tools on how to deal with them because it really wasn't anything that was like talked about.
Yeah.
I think I'm turning 30 this month. The past year has been one of the hardest years for me mentally. I just kind of feel like everything in my life came crumbling down at once. I had family problems, I had friend problems, I had career problems, and then on top of it, I have this pressure of turning 30. I'm a woman, I have a biological clock, I'm a career driven person, and that plays a role into it. There's so many things. And I've never known how to properly deal with it. I've always been the type of person that's like, I'm just going to keep myself really busy and pretend it's not there. And then 6 months down the road, it comes out in some way or another. And I don't want to do that anymore.
Yeah.
And my friend Mina, who I look up to and respect so much, she is so well-versed in the mental health space. She's the person I always call if I'm like, am I going crazy? How do I handle this? What do I do? And I always say to her, like, oh, I wish I had your emotional capacity. I wish I had your emotional intelligence. She just handles everything so gracefully. And the other day, we were talking on the phone, and I had no intent. I was going through a really bad time. For a couple of weeks, I couldn't get out of bed. I couldn't fight this feeling of feeling like I was useless and didn't have a purpose. And I think I don't like talking about it because the second I talk about it, then it's real. Then it's like, oh my God, this is actually a thing. So I didn't want to talk about it. And she had called me, and then all of a sudden I just lost it. And I just was crying, and I'm like, Mina, I am really struggling right now. Like, I'm going through it. I don't know what to do. And part of the reason why I don't like talking about it is because I always have put pressure on myself to be the fun, positive, upbeat, helpful friend. And I'm like, I don't want to put a damper on it. I don't want to bring down the mood. I don't want to show my weakness and then you look at me different. And I went off on her, just telling her everything I was going through. And she just stopped and she was like, Christina, I'm going through everything that you're going through. She said, different experiences and different situations, but all of the emotions that you're going through, I am going through too. And I remember being like, in my mind, I've painted her to be this beacon of mental health, and she just can handle everything so eloquently and gracefully. And when I heard her say that, and we've been friends for 8 years, not that I was happy that she was going through something, but I was like, oh my God, like,
I'm not alone.
I'm not alone. And that was the moment where I was like, my goal for 30 is to be way more transparent with the people in my life and to ask for help and to speak up when I'm going through something, because that just made a huge difference for me, that I now know that you're also struggling, because now we can check in on one another and I don't feel so alone.
Yep.
So for me, being an only child, being somebody that's always isolated myself, community has become something that I've really prioritized for my mental health. And also just like knowing what you need. Like, I know that when I first am going through something, I need space. I need to be on my own. I need to go drive or go to the beach. And I have a partner who respects that. And that's, make sure you have people in your life that understand what you need. And there are times that I'll say to him, like, listen, I'm having a bad day. I just don't want to talk right now, or I'm going to go on a drive. And he's very much like, okay, you let me know when you need me. So just having people in your life that will check in on you, but also respect your boundaries, and not to be so hard on yourself, because you do realize people don't talk about it as much as they should on social media, but everybody is struggling. Every single person is struggling. The person that you think has it the most together is the one that is probably struggling the most. So that would be, that's just, I'm learning. It's not something that, it's not like a tool set you just have. You go through different experiences at different points in your life, and they require a different set of tools, and you just have to obtain those tools one way or another. So, yeah.
I appreciate your transparency on that because it's real. And I relate to it so heavily. And I feel like when I was living in New York, I was in the same place that it's like, if I actually told somebody what I was struggling with, like, I didn't know if I would be able to like get myself back together. And I remember hearing from people that I admired too, and someone saying like, oh, I have really bad anxiety, or I'm on medication, or I go to therapy. I'm like, wait, all of these people that I admire and respect are all like actively maintaining their struggle and like getting through it every day. And that's such a big part of More Than in general. And the I Am More Than podcast is there's women all over this country right now looking to you as if you have all the answers, because you are fun loving and you are a beautiful woman and you show up, and they may not feel like they can show up in that capacity. So I think you just being vulnerable and letting people know where you're at is something that somebody needed to desperately hear today. So I applaud you for that, because it's not easy. It's never easy. And we were also talking before this about like, the older you get, the more things get put in perspective. They get put in their place. And I'm almost 30 as well. And I look back at like all of my 20s and I'm like, I wonder what my 20s would have been like if I had the tools then that I have now. But I think knowing that we obviously can't live in the past, it's like, how do you move forward and change something altogether, especially when it's still a struggle with mental health? So I think talking to people, huge. Community is huge. And I think just continuing to remind people that as much as you think you're the only one going through it, you're not.
Yeah.
And I think in this industry, it's isolating too.
Oh, it's totally isolating. And then social media as well. Like, there's a new set of, like, there's mental health, and now we have social media. And this has just added a whole, like, social media. I understand why people are so hesitant to talk about certain things on social media, because of cancel culture, because of how the internet is, because of, it's not a safe space. As much as people try to come on different platforms and be like, oh, there's no safe space on the internet. And it's frightening. And that is like, I see young kids on TikTok that just sometimes I read the comments and I'm like, oh my God, like, I can't imagine if I were 16 again and I had to deal with this. Like, that it's horrible. It's absolutely horrible, the way that we treat other people. It's a lot. I think that, I think one of the biggest things too, that I wish I could tell myself in my 20s, early 20s, all of my 20s, or anyone, is that the stuff that you think matters does not matter. It's just, at the end of the day, there's only a very small amount of things that matter. And as morbid as it is, I try to think of myself on my deathbed of like, what am I going to play on that last moment? Yeah, the career stuff. And, but at the end of the day, it's the time I spent with my friends, the spontaneous things I did, how I made people feel, what changes I brought to people. Like, all of the stuff that we don't stress about is the most important. And we put so much weight on what people think or how people perceive us or how things are going to turn out. And when you realize at the end of the day that you really don't have control of as much as you think you do, it's a little bit more freeing when you just kind of like let go and you just do the best you can, and you just be nice to people, do the best you can, and just let the rest of the shit go. Yeah. That's all you can do.
And like you said earlier too, like, whatever is actually meant for you is always going to happen for you. It's like, we can delay it as much as we want, but like, ultimately, when you just kind of like you said, be a good human, be nice to people, and like do the best you can, what's meant for you is going to show up.
Absolutely.
Always. And I think that obsessing, it's impossible to not, especially if you're an anxious person. I'm an overly anxious person, so I'll stress about anything all day. But I also think that there's such a stigma that comes attached to the idea of someone struggling with anxiety and depression. And it's becoming normalized to the point that I really don't know anybody that doesn't struggle, especially after COVID. I think that added another layer onto it. But I think just having dialogue like this in such a casual setting is really helpful.
Yeah.
It's helpful for, I mean, I even feel better just hearing that like I'm not alone in my day-to-day struggle.
Totally.
You know?
Yeah, we're all, and like I said, everybody is dealing with some portion of it in some way or another.
Yeah.
That's why it's also like, be nice to people, because you don't know someone's story or what someone's going through. And, you don't know how your action can affect what they're going through. And I always just assume that everybody is struggling, because everybody is struggling. Whether or not they want to talk about it, we're all struggling. So I feel like everything starts like the way I'm going to preface this. I heard this TikTok, and it was some girl quoting an expert, and I'm going to totally butcher this, but essentially 80% of it, they were explaining what anxiety is. And in order to learn how to deal with it, you have to understand what it is. And they were saying that because so much of our brain is already developed when we're young, 80%, I believe, of your anxiety actually comes from when you were a kid. And the anxiety you have usually has nothing to do with present day circumstances, but it's this fight or flight mode that you've enabled since you were a kid. For an example, that's what I've been, in order to understand my anxiety, I've been trying to really figure out things in my childhood that I've never thought about. For one, I always put an immense amount of pressure on myself as a kid. I don't know where it came from. It didn't come from my parents, didn't come from any siblings, because I didn't have any of those. I put this pressure on myself that I had to be a straight A student, the best gymnast, the best daughter, the best friend, to a point where it would make me sick. Like I had to be perfect. And I find myself doing that now, where it's like, well, I can't, that's not done yet. It's not perfect. I'm like, I'm a perfectionist beyond. And sometimes I stop and I'm like, who am I doing this for? Like, this person doesn't care. Nobody cares except this expectation that I've set that is unattainable. So I think trying to look at those situations when you were younger too, of, what did I do as a kid, or do I remember how I felt, kind of helps you understand why you do things now. And that's been really helpful for me. So
I know the exact video that you're talking about. And I think she was talking about Mel Robbins, and she had like a neuroscientist on there that was talking about it. And I think also the stuff that you're consuming, at least for me, I know when I really don't want to deal with my own emotions, it's so easy to go like mindlessly scroll. And then that makes you feel even more like shit, because you're looking at other people's lives, and it just like is a whole process. That I think being really careful with your consumption and what you're listening to. And like, I went and looked for that interview the second I saw that video, because I'm like, I just want to understand, and I want to understand myself better. I want to understand anxiety better. And I think social media often gets like the bad rap for the unrealistic standard it puts out, for some of the toxic stuff that it puts out. But then I hear some stuff like that where I'm like, thank God we ran into those videos, because I think it's making people very aware.
Yeah. I love that there's, I mean, that's like the good and bad of social media. I mean, same. I find that my anxiety, especially now that I spend so much time on social media, because myself, I also, my dog, he has an income now. Like I'm spending more time on social media than I would like to. And I'm seeing a lot of great stuff like that interview, but I'm also seeing a lot of stuff where I'm like, why did I just invest 3 minutes of my time into this person's video about something that I don't even care about? It's like this addiction, and it's, my anxiety is definitely the highest when I'm spending more time on my phone. I see it happen. I see myself just be so anxious, and yet it's such a hard thing to shut off. So that is what I'm working on, is just like, okay, before bed, especially before bed, phone needs to go off. I do not need to be watching somebody in North Dakota show me a day in the life on their, like, I don't need that. I would rather spend that time reading a book or meditating or whatever it is. And I think everybody struggles with that. I mean, it's so addicting. We love watching those things, but do they benefit you in the long run is the question you need to ask yourself.
And I think when your career comes with social media too, It's so hard to create those boundaries, especially because you can work and create and create and create as much as you want to. No one's going to tell you to shut off.
Mm-hmm.
And I think to some benefit, yes. I mean, I'm beyond entertained anytime I see any of your stuff. I love following your dog. Like you're providing entertainment for so many people. And I get that it's giving you probably the fuel that you need as a creative outlet. But I also went and looked into your clothing company. And I think that creative outlet for you too has to feel really cool. And I'm curious when you started that, and is that something that is still just fun, or is there pressure associated with that too?
No, to be honest, I don't really pursue it at all anymore. That was during lockdown, before I, finally went into TikTok. I was cleaning up my laptop and I found a PowerPoint from like 5 years prior of this clothing brand that I came up with. I love graphic tees. I usually buy a lot of men's clothing. And I just feel like there wasn't a lot of women's graphic apparel that resonated with me. So I was like, I'm just going to start making my own. And during lockdown, my boyfriend had seen the PowerPoint and he was like, wait, this is actually a really good idea. And the name it's Woman Child. And the name had come from, that's what my mom has called me ever since I was young, because I am like, I'm a grandmother. I like to, stay in bed and watch TV. And then I'm also very much a child at heart, which I think a lot of people relate to. So I was like, well, I have no excuse. We always make the excuse of like, I don't have the time to do that. And then I was in lockdown and I'm like, damn, I can't use that excuse.
Yeah, I have all the time in the world.
All the time. So I was like, whatever, I'll just try. I'll just, I'll do it. And I didn't know where to start. And that's what kept me from doing it for a while. Cause you're just like, where do you start? And then you realize like, just start, just do something. And I had a dear friend that had her own clothing line and she was a blessing and she helped me with everything, the designs, making it, wholesale. I mean, everything. She taught me everything. And it was great. And we were hand making all of these pieces and I had all the time in the world and it was so much fun. And I felt so good because I remember when we did our first pre-order, it was the weekend before I had gone to Arizona. And I was like, we're not going to have that many orders. I told my friend Nicole, I'm like, don't worry about it. Like, we'll make everything when we get back. We had like 200 orders over the weekend. We had to make everything by hand. And I was like, oh my God, like people are actually doing this? Like they like this? And I got so many messages from people in the Midwest or in the South or just in small towns that were like, some of my stuff was a little bit vulgar, but it was always, everything came from a place of like female empowerment and not caring what other people think. There was always a good message behind it, although it was quote unquote vulgar. And I had so many messages of people being like, I always wanted to wear stuff like this. And seeing you wear it gave me permission to wear it. Like, I felt like it was okay. And I was like, wow, that is so cool. So that was the fulfillment for me was I felt like I created this community where people could wear what they wanted and it was acceptable. And then it was always for fun. Again, it was never anything I put pressure on. It wasn't like this is going to be my income. I knew it was never going to be my income. I had fun doing it. I was checking off that box of being creative. And then I was like, I got really involved in, my cause, if I were to pick a cause, is homelessness. I've always been really passionate about doing work for our homeless neighbors, especially in Los Angeles. And I had been working with a couple of organizations and nonprofits in Los Angeles. And then I was like, why not incorporate this into what I'm doing? So then I started a kindness collection and a portion of the proceeds went to the nonprofits that I was working with. And I was just getting a lot of fulfillment that way. I felt like I was doing what I wanted to do, which was to provide entertainment and then to help people. And now it's just something, and then everything opened back up and I was able to, and I was also doing social media. So I got that fulfillment elsewhere, but it's always just been there. And every once in a while, someone will check in and be like, oh my God, I just found your brand. This is so cool. And one day when I have the finances and the resources and the team. I would love to make it this brand, this experience, where people can just do whatever the heck they want. So yes, that was very fulfilling for me. I'm really happy that I got to do that.
What verbiage did you use on your website? I looked at it. It was like appropriately
inappropriate,
vulgar, inappropriately,
appropriately
inappropriate.
We're gonna look. It's been a while.
It was, when I saw it, I was like, that is the best thing I've heard.
That I remember when I appropriately offensive.
Yes.
Appropriately offensive. Yes. And that was my thing, where it's like, there are some, I'm also from Boston. Like, the F word is a term of endearment. Like, I remember coming to Los Angeles and dropping the F bomb and people immediately assuming it came from like this really aggressive place. I'm like, no, that's like a filler word.
This is normal.
Yeah. So it's, some of the language and the verbiage is traditionally offensive, but it comes from, the message is good. The message is supposed to be positive. So that was, I forgot about that. Thanks for reminding me.
Oh, of course. Did you notice, side question, a huge difference going from Boston of all places to the West Coast?
Yes.
So different, right?
Yes.
Just even the way people interact with each other. And so I'm from the West Coast and went to the East Coast and lived there. And was like,
I think that's hard.
Is everybody mad, or do we just like, what is our language here?
There's a quote that says, and I really like it. It says, live on the East Coast, but not long enough that it hardens you. Live on the West Coast, not long enough that it softens you. Ooh, and I think I love having the balance of doing both, because I had way more of a harder shell on the East Coast. I mean, even mental health, that's still something that's pretty taboo. It's not openly talked about. And the West Coast softened me up, but just the perfect amount where I feel like I still have my East Coast street smarts and confidence, but then LA has given me freedom, creative freedom to be softer. I mean, I remember one of my first experiences that was like, wait, what? I was at a Walgreens and the cashier was like, how's your day going? And I remember being like,
why do you want to know?
And the girl I was with kind of like laughed at me and we left. She was like, why were you so awkward? I was like, I don't know. Like, I'm supposed to just like bring up my stuff and I'm supposed to leave. She's like, no, like people here like stop and enjoy, smell the flowers and have conversations. And I'm like, oh, if you're back east and some random person starts talking to you, you go the other way. It's just, so it was so nice that I'm like, oh my God, it's just, I think it made me more personable being on the West Coast. Like I love people more now than I did when I was on the East Coast, because it's not taboo to talk to people, you know, at Trader Joe's or whatever it is. So very different though. Very different places.
Very different. And you brought up confidence too. And I think that from the outside perspective, you radiate confidence in everything that you do. And I think so many of our listeners and in our community too is always looking for ways to increase their confidence, tactics that they can use every day to try and just get a little bit better. So is that even something you're intentional about? Were you born with it? Are you doing stuff every day to like increase your confidence?
I think this is also why I have kind of not opened up to people as much, because so many people perceive me to be very confident, which I am. I think that I'm a confident person, but a lot of times I'm really not. And I think stand-up comics, for an example, I love stand-up comedy. I love the world of stand-up comedy. And a lot of stand-up comics are very transparent about the fact that a lot of them are dealing with depression or mental health. It's just, that's their coping mechanism, right?
Yeah, it's comedy.
I mean, Pete Davidson, he always, when he talks about his father passing, he always does it with humor. And I remember going to one of his shows and, you know, he made a joke and people were like, ooh, and he's like, this is my father. This is how I cope. Comedy heals. This is how I deal with things. And that's kind of how I feel about me. Like comedy is very healing for me. And I think a lot of my confidence comes from comedy. Yeah. And I use comedy as a tool for everything. When there's an awkward moment when I don't feel confident, when I'm meeting somebody for the first time. Comedy is what I default to. And I think that's where people see the confidence. Because I am confident in my comedic ability. I am confident in my personality. Everything else is a toss up with being confident. But I think I've also realized that I was in a really bad relationship. I was not myself for many years. I shut off being the goofy, loud girl because that wasn't cool. And then I realized that at the end of the day, I can be me better than anybody else can be me. And I can try to be somebody else, but there's somebody that's going to do that so much better. So all I can do is just be me. That's all I can do. That's the only thing I know. And I think the good part of social media is that we're now leaning into like authenticity. People love like not having the perfect feed, or, you know, doing a video and you mess up on when you're speaking, you don't have to like restart. There's just more. People love to see people being real.
Yeah.
And that's also motivated me to just keep being me and doing me. So I think, yeah, the confidence sometimes is the shield. It's my coping mechanism. Sometimes it's fake it till you make it. Sometimes it's authentic. But for the most part, I'm pretty proud of who I am, and I'm not perfect. I have a lot of things that I would change, but at the end of the day, this is all I can do. This is all I can be. And I see people love it. And people react great to it. So, you know, I'm just going to keep trying to do it.
I think that's probably the best answer we've ever gotten.
Hey, I'll take it.
Because I've never met somebody who is confident 100% of the time. Totally. It doesn't happen. And I think the whole fake it till you make it is like the best advice for doing anything ever in life.
Because you start to believe it.
Yeah, exactly. And it's also what you're telling yourself too. Like, your words have so much power. And so on the days that you're telling yourself that you're not good enough and you're beating yourself up, you're going to believe it. On the days that you are pumping yourself up, you're going to act that way. You're going to show up with an extra layer of confidence. So I think it's cool to know that like you're never going to arrive to a place where you're just suddenly confident. And I think that especially as almost 30-year-old women, finally getting to this place. And I always thought that like, once I'm older, it'll just come. Mm-hmm. Like at some point it's just going to click. And I think the more life I live, the more I'm like, I don't think it does.
No.
Like, I mean, it just clicks.
I think, well, two things. One of my girlfriends, we were talking the other day, and she was talking about life as like a video game. And we were saying how, you know, you do your first level and you gain tools, you gain weapons, you gain armor, you gain things. And sometimes you do the second level, sometimes you fail that level and you have to do it again. But you have more knowledge now because you've already done it. So every time you're leveling up, you're experiencing things that are very new. It's not like, oh, I already did level 1, so let's go to level 20. I know what I'm doing. It's like along the way, the experiences get harder and harder and harder and harder. Life doesn't get easier. You just obtain more tools to be able to deal with it. And I think you realize that the older you get, you got to make sure that you're picking the people in your life carefully. Because even at 30, you go through friendship problems, you go through family issues, relationship issues. You have to make sure that you are being very selective about the people in your corner and in your life. And the only way to do that is to be yourself. Because if I'm being fully myself and somebody treats me horribly, I know I was myself, and me and that relationship isn't meant to be. But if I feel like I'm putting on something or I'm trying to be a people pleaser, I'm never going to know if the relationships in my life are genuine, if they're meant to be there. The only way you're ever going to know if things in your life are meant for you is if you're facing everything with full authenticity. That's the only way you're ever going to know. So that's another driving force for me of, if something doesn't work out for me, but I know I was being myself, I can have a little bit more peace about it, being like I did what I could do. So that's huge. Huge.
Does that translate into your career too, where you are right now?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, I've, in the beginning of my career, I would try to be whoever I thought people needed me to be, whether it was a casting director or a friend or an agent or whatever. I tried, and those relationships didn't work for one reason or another, but I wasn't being my authentic self. Whereas now it's like, even when I meet with agents, I'm like, listen, I'm going to be straight up. This is who I am. This is what I like. This is what I don't like. This is what I think I'm good at. This is who I am. I never want to have to convince you to want to be on my team. If you like everything that I stand for and you feel like it's a good match, let's do this. If not, there's nothing else I can give you other than me.
Yep.
So you have more peace about things in your life and they don't work when you're being authentic.
You have peace, and you also get a layer of freedom where it's like you don't have so much on the line every single time. It's just you get to just be.
Yeah.
And I think that's all we really want, no matter what your career is, no matter what relationship you're in, whatever friendship you're in, you just want to be accepted for who you are.
Exactly.
And I think it's cool that you've gotten to a place where you're finally just like, this is it.
Listen, it took a long time. Like, it took, again, it's like when you see an actor and you're like, oh my God, you came out of nowhere. Like, there's all of this work that happens behind the scenes. Like, I've gone through so much in the past several years that I haven't really been open about, but like, there's been stuff that has been going on that has gotten me here. So that's also another testament of like, you're going to go through really hard shit in your life and it's not going to make sense. One day it's going to make sense. And one day you're going to be so appreciative that you went through it when you did and you got those tools, because you're going to have to go through something even harder. And if you didn't go through that little thing that was annoying, that was frustrating, that you didn't understand, you wouldn't be able to tackle this. So trying to like be grateful, as poetic as that sounds, of the good and the bad.
Yeah.
Is so key.
Nope. Major key.
Major key.
Who says that all the time? DJ Khaled. Major key.
Major key.
I've never felt more dorky or swaggy than just
you.
That moment, but you know, we're doing our best. You talked about comedy. I feel like you belong on a stand-up stage. We need Netflix specials. We need the whole thing. Is that a direction that you're interested in going? Or
I would love to. My last manager would call me all the time and be like, so you're doing it? You're doing it? When are you doing it? I've had stuff written. It's scary. Here's the confidence. I'm confident. Yeah. That is so scary. I go to shows and I'm like, oh, I could do it. I could be up there. And I deal with failure every day. I get rejected from jobs every day, but it's not a rejection in a room, right? It's like, that is horrifying to think about. But eventually, yes, I would love to be on a stage doing comedy in some capacity. So much. It's just, it's taken me a while to finally do it, but I
That's
will.
Okay. It'll take time. Well, if you ever need a hype girl in your corner, I'll be over here. I got one. Just like,
that's all I need. I only need one.
You know what? You got me.
Perfect.
You got at least one.
And well, then let's go. Let's go do an open mic.
Let's go. You know what? I'll come. I'll fly out there.
Perfect.
Just be the front row. Well, it has been amazing getting to know you. You're even 10 times cooler than I already knew you were going to be. But thank you for just being so real and open, because I feel like it's conversations like this that not only can be beneficial for us experiencing it, but it's going to continue inspiring people the more and more they download. So thank you for showing up as you. That's not common. And
thank you for having a platform to allow me to do this. You have made me feel so comfortable, and this is very therapeutic for me. You know how sometimes you speak something out and you're like, I didn't realize I thought that until I just said it. That was really beneficial. So thank you. I really appreciate it.
Self-exploration all the time.
There you go.
I love it. We're always growing. Well, pimp yourself out. Where can people find you? How can people get in touch with you?
I'm on TikTok and Instagram at Christina Kirkman. We are working on a film. I'm filming something this April that I can chat more about at a later date. And then, I don't know. I'm IMDb.
I'm hyped. Well, when you can talk about it, we just need to bring you back.
Perfect.
So that we can dive into the full project.
Perfect. Can't wait.
Amazing. Well, until then, thank you again. Thank you to your pup. Such a good boy. Just being a model behind you.
He's giving you the side eye right now.
I know. He's like, honestly, hop off.
It's like, I gotta go to the bathroom.